Okay. Hi all. Very good morning. Today we will be discussing, regarding the essentials of Indian polity as to why is this book has to be referred, especially for the civil service examination. Why this book is considered to be important, and what are the benefits once an aspirant reads this book. That's what I would like to summarize here. See, whenever you want to, whenever any aspirant is preparing for the examinations, the first question that arises for any aspirant is, what are the books that we are supposed to read for the examination, right? So there are a lot of books, multiple books referred by many, rankers, institutes, many books they will be, referring to. But one such book that every student has to refer is Essentials of Indian Polity. I am Neeharika Reddy. I am a High Court advocate, and I have authored this book. And I will let you know as to why an aspirant has to definitely read this book. Just a little understanding of discussion. It will be a kind of a discussion. First, I will present as to what are the important things that this book covers, or why there is an added advantage if any student or an aspirant refer this book. That's what I'm going to discuss in this session. So once that discussion is completed, you can ask me questions, any question which is related to polity, governance, or the constitution, which is from legal perspective. Anything you can ask me which is related to the examination, right? So let me allow me to share the screen here. Here in this particular thing, subject matter, first we'll understand the syllabus. Let's look at briefly understand or appreciate what is the syllabus all about, right? Now, if you look at the syllabus of Indian polity, or the constitution, we call it as, we famously, or we started calling it as, okay, for prelims and mains we are supposed to read only polity, but UPSC never said that. It did not ask you to only understand polity. It actually expects you to understand or study beyond polity. Why? Look at the syllabus itself. When I talk about constitution, there are three dimensions in the constitution. One is polity, another one is legal dimension of the constitution, and the third one is a governance dimension. What is the polity dimension? Polity will only speak about the political structure. It only speaks about the political structure of the country, or what is a political structure that the constitution has prescribed at the central level, state level, as well as local bodies level. Alok Kumar has raised hand. Is there anything that you wanted to say, Alok? If there are any doubts and all, we will take it up in the end. But otherwise, we can. If you have any doubts, you can just message in the chat box, so I will be able to answer those doubts, right? Now, firstly, I would like to tell the three dimensions of the constitution. One is political dimension, another one is legal dimension, another is governance. Political dimension, what do you mean by that? As already discussed, it speaks about the political structure that we are having, or what kind of political structure the constitution endorses at the central level, state level, local bodies level. All that things we need to understand. So who are the members, or what are the powers? What are the functions of these members who are occupying these political structures, or what are the commissions that have been created? This is what falls under the political structure. Coming to the legal structure, legal aspect of the constitution. Hindi may actually, the medium of the language that I'm right now speaking is English. Alok Kumar, but I do understand Hindi and I can answer in Hindi, but the session will be in English. Yeah, I mean, if you're not able to follow it, let me know, or we can have a separate session for only in Hindi. But as of now, we are only taking up in English. But I do understand. I can clear the doubts in the end in Hindi as well. Is that okay for you? Because there are certain terminologies which I can speak, legal terminologies or some things which I can only explain in English. That's the whole point. So this book is in English right now. That's the reason why I'm trying to explain this terminologies also in English as well. Right? Now, coming to the legal dimension. Now, coming to the legal dimension is basically we are trying to understand the same constitution. What are the fundamental rights? How did the Supreme Court interpret the constitution? What are the ways to interpret the constitution? And what are the landmark cases? What are the doctrines, etc.? In the legal perspective only, what are the acts which are flowing from the constitution? And how to interpret those acts, etc. Those are all falling under the legal dimension. Why? Because legal dimension, the minute if I speak about legal dimension, there are multiple rights the citizens of this country enjoys. Even aliens also enjoy various rights under the constitution. But how are these rights enjoyed? How are they interpreted? How is Supreme Court going to protect this? There are certain explicit rights, there are certain implicit rights. Explicit rights anyways are given in the constitution. We have landmark judgments for. What about the implicit rights? The rights which are not given in the constitution explicitly, but Supreme Court interpreted and started promising these rights to the individuals of this country. What are those rights? How did they evolve? What are the judgments about it? Everything we have to understand from the legal dimensions. And the third dimension, that is governance dimension. What is governance? Constitution is already drafted. According to the constitution, if you want to run the political system, legal system effectively, there should be certain laws which has to support it. There has to be a machinery or a mechanism which has to support it, which is outside the constitution or outside the regular government structure. That falls under the governance. Government, civil society agencies, to make sure this civil society agencies or the government to run efficiently. There are certain bodies which are outside the constitution but are very, very necessary for the administration, like anti-corruption agencies or civil society agencies, self-help groups, which is part of civil society too. In this way, what are the acts governed? Now, just understanding about anti-corruption agency like CBI, CVC, that's not sufficient. What is governance? What is actually good governance? How is that different from corporate governance? What are the types of governance? What is corporate e-governance? Various types of governance that we have to understand. Then we have to understand what are the laws or the legislations which are actually promoting governance in our country, like Right to Information Act, Citizen Charter, or say, for example, important acts, anti-corruption acts like Prevention of Corruption Act, Fugitive Offenders Act, Benami Transaction Act. These are all the acts that we need to appreciate. Not only that, there are various rights which are outside the constitution, but still which are essential, like human rights, rights for women, rights of children, rights of transgender. These are the multidimensional thing that we need to appreciate in governance. Okay, these are the acts. Then what are the agencies which are implementing it? Where there are various investigating agencies, there are various kinds of courts in our country which are implementing. Investigating agencies starting from ED, CBI, CVC, Lokpal, Lokayukta. These are all the investigating agencies which are actually helping the courts to investigate and find the person who is accused. And what are the kinds of the courts? What kind of courts are we having? Fast track courts? What are the different types of dispute resolution mechanisms are we having? These are all the things they are expecting in the government. It's not that I'm saying this. Look at the syllabus. Generally, how our preparation should be as an aspirant. I was also an aspirant at one point of time. I also went till the interview. But the basic thing is we should not study or we should not prepare the examination based on the book, but we should prepare the examination based on the syllabus and see whether the book is covering that syllabus or not. Look at that prelim syllabus only, whatever is given in the UPSC notification only that I'm pointing out here. If you look at the prelim syllabus, first you're having Indian polity, right? Then you have governance and constitution, which means they're asking you to concentrate not just on the political system, but also governance as well as the legal dimension, that is constitution. Panchayat Raj institutions, public policy, rights issue. These are all the things they are expecting you to understand from the examination. This is prelims. Rights issue means what? You are going to understand about human rights. You are going to understand about the Say, for example, rights of children, minorities, linguistic minorities, religious minorities, everything we need to understand about their rights. Not only the rights which are mentioned in the Constitution, the legal rights we need to understand, fundamental rights we need to understand, constitutional rights also we need to understand. All these rights are mentioned in the rights issue. And various kinds of policies which are helping the administration to run smoothly. Those kind of policy issues also we need to understand. This is what the prelim syllabus is all about. Now look at the main syllabus. Main syllabus, they will give in a very great detail. In a very great detail means basically what is Indian Constitution. Of course, that you're going to anyway study their evolution, basic structure. Then coming to functions and responsibilities of the union and the state. Separation of powers. Comparison of the Indian constitutional schemes with that of the other countries, which means not only Indian Constitution, we need to appreciate what are the other constitutions talking about. How is our constitution different from the other constitutions? These are also things which we need to concentrate on. Parliament and the state legislature. Representation of the People's Act. Appointment of the constitutional bodies. All these things they are expecting. These are the regular things that we are going to anyway study in the polity aspect and the legal aspect. Then they are expecting you the governance, self-help groups, NGOs, civil societies, vulnerable sections. Who are vulnerable sections in our society? What are the problems? How should we protect their problems? What are the commissions or the bodies which are there to protect their problems or address their problems? Then what do you mean by transparency, accountability? What are the various legislations, not just the commissions? Just if you read the commission, don't think that you will understand the legislation. You need to understand the legislation along with the commissions too. All these things they're expecting you to study from the examination perspective, including the role of civil services in a democracy. Ultimately, you're going to be a civil service aspirant. So these are the things that they are asking you in the syllabus. But we generally take a book and whatever there is in the book, we'll read that and we'll think that our preparation is completed. Just looking at, I'm only showing you the previous year's trend of the question papers. Let's look at the main questions that they have asked. This is 2022 questions. UPSC Prelims GS Paper 2 2022 questions. First question. The most significant achievement of modern law in India is the constitutionalization of environmental problems by the Supreme Court. Now, this is not a regular polity question. Then what kind of question is this? This is a legal dimension of the Constitution. What do you mean by legal dimension? Supreme Court has recognized various kinds of implicit rights through wonderful judgments. And it has brought, actually, Supreme Court has laid down a lot of foundation as to how should the environment be protected. If environment is polluted, who should be responsible for it? What liability the people will have, what liability the government will have. Everything it has given beautiful judgments. A lot of public interest litigations that have been filed before the Supreme Court. Now, under the public interest litigations, one of the famous cases like MC Mehta versus Union of India actually speaks about these environmental issues. That's what they're asking in this first question. But where is it given? How should we study that? Every aspirant will have a problem. Law student may or may not have this problem. But every student who is not a law student will definitely have this problem. This is one thing. Just giving you the examples of what kind of questions they're asking. Next, come. To what extent, in your opinion, has a decentralization of power in India changed the landscape at the governance landscape at the grassroots? The minute if you understand this, looking at this question, everyone will think, oh, they're asking about democratic decentralization. So let's write about Panchayat Raj institutions or urban local bodies, rural local bodies. But they did not ask you only political decentralization. Decentralization of power includes financial decentralization, political decentralization, administrative decentralization. Among all these three things, which decentralization is happening in our country, which decentralization is not happening? Because all these three decentralizations are very important. So we need to first understand what are the types of decentralization. Then how this decentralization is happening. Where are the bottlenecks? How should we address this? This we all, if we know, if we understand this concept, then definitely we can write this answer. Maybe a public administration optional student will be able to answer this one. But what about others? For this, you need not read public administration, because UPSC never asks outside the syllabus. It is asking within the syllabus, but we are not able to appreciate what is the syllabus exactly. That's the main problem. So look at the second point. So this has to be addressed. This is actually political governance related question. Next, look at the third question that they asked. Discuss the procedures to decide the disputes arising with respect to the elections, and what are the grounds on which elections can be declared void. What is the remedy that the aggrieved party has against the decision? Which means they're asking you, Representation of Peoples Act 1951. Under that act, if there is any election dispute, where you have to approach? Who will have original jurisdiction? After the decision given, whether it is binding or not. If you're agreed by the decision, whether there is any appellate jurisdiction. If appellate jurisdiction is existing, to which court we need to approach, which means they're asking you dispute resolution mechanism with respect to elections. It's not pure polity question. It's not pure constitution question too. It's actually dealing about legal dimension as well as governance dimension they're dealing. Now look at the next question. All these questions are 2020 questions, 2022 questions only. I'm not explaining, I'm not giving some hypothetical questions here. Now, next, look at this. Critically examine the procedures through which the presidents of India and France are elected, which means 2013, the syllabus got changed. Till 2022, for almost 9 years, they never asked a question with respect to comparison of the constitution. First time they asked, which means we need to be prepared with respect to the syllabus. It's the choice of UPSC. Whenever they want to ask, they will ask it or they may not ask it. Which kind of constitution? Is it necessary for me to remember all the constitutions of the world? Means, of course not. UPSC will also logically expect you to compare Indian constitution with other major democratic civilized constitutions, like USA, which is one of the oldest democratic written constitution, UK, one of the oldest democratic unwritten constitution, French constitutions, France especially, right? Then constitutions like Ireland, South Africa, Australia. Why? These constitutions are actually having good things that we also can look into it. Canadian constitution or these constitutions. Why? Because they respect democratic values. They have federal system. They promote secularism. So these are the things which are essential even for our country. So how we are doing or how they are doing, what are the things that they need to borrow from India and what are the things that we need to borrow from them, depending upon the demands or the situations. That's what they're expecting you to do. They don't expect you to know about the constitution of North Korea, Saudi Arabia. That's not required. So there are certain constitutions which they are expecting that understanding you should have. These are mains related questions. Look at the 2023 prelims related questions. Now look at the question, this one. According to the Constitution of India, the central government has a duty to protect the states from internal disturbances. This is Constitution question. Now next, look at the next line. The Constitution of India exempts the state from providing legal counsel to a person being held for preventive detention. That is also something related to Article 22. According to the Prevention of Terrorism Act, confession of the accused before the police cannot be used as an evidence. This statement is wrong. Why? Because actually, according to criminal law, any confession made before the police officer is not admissible in law or not admissible in the court. Exception is Preventive Detention Act, especially this Prevention of Corruption Act 2002. Under this, you can make confession, but the confession has to be made to a police officer who is SP or above that cadre, not below that cadre, which is an exception to the general rule. Why are they asking you criminal law? Is it the first time they're asking you criminal law thing? Even in 2022 prelims also, they asked about what is the difference between bail and a parole. They're asking you about the arrest. Why all these things means they are not expecting you to know entire criminal legal system. No, they're not expecting that. But Article 20, 22, these two articles are very, very important to understand criminal laws in our country. Why? Because how the criminal law should be, 20 gives. 22 also gives what are the rights that you're going to have at the time of an arrest. So criminal law, how basically it has to be, and what are their exceptions. And 22, how, what do you mean by punitive, preventive detentions? What do you mean by arrest? So definitely they're going to ask you bail, parole. These are all the things which are related to arrest. Okay, we have to produce before magistrate within 24 hours. What is the right after produce? What do you mean by police custody? What do you mean by judicial custody? Everything they'll ask. Right? Because we think that it is related to criminal law, but Article 20 and 22 actually deals with the criminal law, which we are ignoring. Understood the point? That's the reason they have asked a question. Now look at the next question. Same thing, Indian Prisons Act. Indian Prisons actually comes under the control of the state list. But the center is passing a model prisons law just to make sure that the concept of jail should change. Till now, Indian judicial system or Indian prisons were acting as preventive or deterrent effect. But coming now, the central government wants the jails to convert into a reformative institutions. Why? Because ultimately our aim is not just to punish anyone. We don't believe in retributive justice. Jails should be a place where criminals should be reformed. That opportunity the jail should provide. In that way, the jail should be modified. That's the reason why modern prison law is coming up. So what is retributive? What is deterrent? What is reformative? These are all aspects which are overlapping with the criminal justice system, which very well falls under Article 20 and 22. Right? Now that's the reason they asked it. Now let's look at the next question. The self-help groups. Self-help groups, we think it's a civil society question. You might read it as a part of a current affair, but of course not. It's a part of a static syllabus only, because self-help group is a powerful institution under civil society. In the same way, NGOs, in the same way, pressure groups. There are multiple civil society organizations which we are supposed to understand, but we think that yes, it falls under the current affairs or governance part, so let's deal it separately. Only for mains we will study. No, these are very well asked in your prelims only. You can't make up answers in prelims. You have to be pinpointedly, you should be in a position to answer it. So being a mentor, many of my students requested to author a book. So with the help of GKP Publications, I actually authored this book called as Essentials of Indian Polity. Not just polity. We will be discussing about constitution as well as governance too. Now, this book was published in the month of May of this year. Now, look at the contents. Just I'll show you the contents. Now, I will be dealing in this 3 parts. The book is divided into 3 parts. One is polity. Another one is polity when I'm talking about, which speaks about constitution, legal perspective, as well as political perspective. Both the dimensions I have covered in part 1. Next to part 2, comparison of the constitution, where I have compared Indian constitutions with the other constitutions like American, USA, France, Australia, South Africa. In this way, I have compared with the world's best constitutions. Now, coming to part 3 of the constitution, part 3 of the book, we have especially I have dealt about the governance. Now look into the contents of it. I'm just giving a sample of it. Now part 1 of the constitution, if you look at, just look at this one. First, I have introduced what is constitution. That is very, very important. If you don't understand why you're reading the constitution, then there's no purpose of understanding. I mean, the ultimate aim will be defeated. You need to understand why you're reading in the first place. That interest has to be there. When you're reading such a book of 700 pages or 800 pages, you have to grasp you have to keep the grip of the reader. That's the reason why I have written this book. The contents of the book, both covering factual point, background, as well as, giving you the current scenarios, example, like a story I have given, so that it will be easy for you to remember, understand it. Just look at the first chapter. What is constitution? What are the qualities of a good constitution? What do you mean by constitutionalism? Features of constitutionalism. Whether constitutionalism is there in Indian constitution or not. What is constitutional morality? What is public morality? All the basic concepts I have given in only first chapter. If you read this chapter, it's not only useful for your GS, sociology optional, for you constitutional morality, public morality, for public administration, for political science, for everyone, this chapter is very, very important to understand what do you mean by the basics in the first place. Then you will understand, okay, first you will understand what is the purpose of the constitution. Then it is easy for you to understand what are the forms of the government, constitutional history. These things you will understand. Next thing, just look at this budget. You will study, but look at my one. I'm just showing you one page in the budget chapter. One page in the budget chapter. Look at the documents that. What are the documents that are produced before or laid before the parliament, especially in the Lok Sabha, at the time of the budget session? That we will generally understand. Okay, first there will be annual financial statement. After annual financial statement, there will be a break. Then then budget discussion starts. Vote on account will start. But what are the documents? What do you mean by financial bill? What is an appropriation bill? How is this expenditure showed? In what way they have broken down the expenditure? In what way they are breaking down the receipt? Ultimately, what is FRBM? What are the documents under FRBM? Everything I have given. Why? Generally, we'll think that, oh, why am I supposed to read all these things? These things will come in economy somewhere. It will not come in economy purely. It also comes in the constitution. Why? Because these procedures are pretty well part of it. We ignore it. If you understand a budget session like this by referring this book, then there is nothing to stop you in terms of understanding the entire procedure that goes on in the budget session. In the same way, federalism. I have spoken about asymmetric federalism. What do you mean by symmetric federalism? What kind of federalism India has? In the same way, what do you mean by decentralization, financial decentralization, administrative decentralization, political decentralization, everything which is important from the syllabus perspective, GS perspective, completely covered. Next, look at this comparisons of the constitution. That is also covered. Next, look at the governance. Concept of governance, good governance. What are the types of governance? What do you mean by rule of law? What do you mean by participation, accountability, transparency, equity, inclusiveness? Not only that, what do you mean by people's participation in good governance? Right to information, citizen charter, corruption. Look at the corruption laws. Just look at the corruption laws that I have given. Prevention of Corruption Act, Binami Transaction Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, Fugitive of Economic Offenders Act, Whistleblowing, everything I have covered. All the major acts which actually tackle the corruption, I have given them. Anti-corruption agencies in India, like Enforcement Directorate, CVC, CBI, Lokpal, SFIO, all this. Once you understand the act, then you will understand the mandate of these agencies. Without that, if I just read what is CBC, what is its composition, UPS is not interested to just understand, ask you who will be the CBI director, or what is the strength of CVC, or what is the strength of that's done. Now UPS is moving to the next level. So you need to understand all these things. E-governance, human rights as a foundation of good governance. What is Human Rights Act in the first place? Next to civil society. Look at this. The question, if you look at Prelims Questions 2023 or Mains Prelims or Mains 2022, you can answer that in and out without referring any other book, just if you read Essentials of Indian Polity. Self-help groups, NGOs, everything is clearly covered. Not only that, role of civil services in the parliamentary democracy. What do you mean by lateral entry? How was Indian administration during the British period? What is the need of the civil services? Comparative analysis of civil servants in pre and post-independence era. criticism, red tapeism, what are the problems, why is there transparency, accountability, pros and cons of lateral entry, everything I've discussed. Not only that, in the appendices, if you look at, appendices are so rich in list of all the case laws, major landmark case laws, judgments that the Supreme Court has given, which are important from environmental perspective, rights issue perspective, LGBT, human rights, elections, political system, everything, every topic I have given the gist of case laws. What else you required for this? What else you required for the preparation of it? Now, this book is not only essential for your GS preparation. Any aspirant who is preparing for political science optional, public administration optional, sociology optional, for all these kind of important options, including legal law option, for them this book is necessary. So that's the reason why I'm taking today as an opportunity to that's the reason I'm taking this as an opportunity to explain as to why one has to read this book. And not only that, if you read this book, you will think that the same old thing, it's being repeating too much factual. No, just give it a try. Just give it a try. Just pick up citizenship chapter. Whichever book you want to read it. Just give it a try and read my book also. In that citizenship chapter, I've discussed about what are the types of citizenships. What are the rights a refugee will have? What do you mean by an asylum? Then I spoke about the importance of Citizenship Amendment Acts. Now tell me which book covers in this comprehensive way. Next important thing I'll do. Now I'm talking about center-state relations. In the center-state financial relations, I've clearly broke down the structure, which are, what do you mean by direct taxes, indirect taxes, who is covering what, which money will move into Consolidated Fund of India, which money doesn't move into Consolidated Fund of India, how the sharing happens. Clearly I've given, even pictorial representations also I've given. Clear breakdown I've given. So it is easy for you to understand the role of Finance Commission, the role of GST Council, the role of Niti Aayog, and what was the role of the Planning Commission also. So the background, the foreground, the current scenario, everything I have come. Now just open the Directive Principles of State Policy chapters. For each and every directive principle, what is the scheme? What is the act that are actually implementing the DPSP? I have given. Now tell me, beyond this, where UPSC will ask you questions? Your constitution, legal dimension, political dimension, governance dimension, all the three dimensions are covered. On top of that, comparison of the constitutions are also covered. Now beyond this, UPSC will not ask. And with this, your holistic preparation for the GS paper 2 will be completed. I assure you that. So this is what I would like to tell here. And not only that, after each and every chapter, once I have explained the chapter, I've given you the sample objective questions, sample subjective questions also. So for you to understand what kind of questions can appear from a particular chapter, that examples also I've given. Just to make sure that your preparation will be holistic and you will be having the best of your time while reading this book. That's the reason why I have given that. So I request you, take time, just go through it. It will, I promise you that the questions, whatever appearing in the next prelims or coming mains also, you can just, the mains paper, none of us know it, yes or no? See how many questions will be directly asked from the book itself. In other words, of course, UPSC will not ask questions from a book. That's not their attitude. They will ask a question, but that question will be covered in my book is what I'm trying to say. Definitely it will be covered. So that I can promise you, right? So this is what I would like to explain in today's session. So now 10 minutes or 10-15 minutes, I will dedicate for you to ask me questions. I thank everyone, GKP Publication and the Institute as well as Wajiram for providing this opportunity to discuss with you guys. But the forum is open for you to ask me questions which is related to the book, examination, and the subject matter. Anything with related to these three things, you can ask me a question. If you have any doubts, you can let me know. You can chat here as well. Prediction means, see, okay, Uday, one thing I would like to tell. Now, we can predict a question on what basis? First, we understand the syllabus holistically. And once we study the syllabus, whatever the syllabus that they're asking you to study, if you study that holistically, and if you look at the current scenario or current affairs, then you can easily predict what kind of question they can ask you. Now, in prelims, they expected you to learn about governance. So you have to study governance. You have to study polity, political structure. You have to study the legal dimension. These three things you will study. Then see what kind of questions they can expect. Definitely self-help groups is something they will ask you because they're expecting you how the civil society is performing. Definitely they'll ask you with respect to criminal laws, why Constitution Article 2022 was discussing about it. Moreover, Ministry of Home Affairs is actually trying to revamp the entire criminal laws in our country. The Indian Penal Code, which is actually the British law. We are even following that 1860 law, we are even following right now. So they're actually revamping these laws. So definitely they'll be asking a question which is related to criminal law as well as constitution. Wherever it is overlapping, they're asking you a question. Indian Prisons Act, why? Because recently the central government has passed a model prisons law, which is actually a state subject. Why is this? Why is this? Means this is actually related to criminal justice system and the constitution. So if you study the static syllabus completely and thoroughly, and if you see correlate with what is happening within the country, which means you only can expect, you can only predict. Yeah, these kind of questions they are going to ask you. Definitely they'll ask you questions related to, once again, next prelims also wait and watch. They'll definitely ask you a question which is related to political structure. They are not asking much because everyone is prepared about the political structure. They'll definitely ask you the legal dimension, governance dimension, especially criminal related questions they will ask you, because that is in the process. So next 2-3 years, you can expect that too. So that's a reason why just to look at the syllabus whenever you're starting a preparation, look at the syllabus and see whether you are able to cover it all. I was able to answer your question, Uday? Any more questions, ma? Thank you. Any more questions? And one more thing I would like to tell here is, from in the next edition, I would be releasing or I'll be adding certain basics of criminal law. Why? Because not because they are going to ask you criminal law. It's not a syllabus, but the basics of what is happening in the justice system, because this keeps appearing in the news every time. Like, what do you mean by judicial custody? What do you mean by police custody? What do you mean by bail? What do you mean by parole? What do you mean by at the time of arrest? What are the rights that are there for women especially? Then what do you mean by zero FIR? Then what is FIR? What is charge sheet? These are certain basic. What do you mean by accused? What do you mean by convict? These are the basic things I would like to cover in my next edition. So it will be all the more useful for your prelims as well as mains, which is coming up in the year 2024 also. But now, already I have covered comprehensively everything, because some students have requested me to cover that one also, basics of it. That also I would be covering in the next edition. But now the legal dimension of the constitution, political dimension, or the governance dimension, everything is covered. For your understanding, just buy a book, go through yourself, you will understand. It's hardly how much it costs you. $700 these days is nothing. right? So you can just go through it and you will only appreciate whether what I have said is right or wrong, right? Any more doubts, guys? No, ma. Prisons Act, why they asked is, of course, you are not going to cover Prisons Act, but it is a part of current affairs. Prisons Act is a state subject. Now, I told you, right? If you understand the basics of criminal law, you will easily appreciate why they are bringing changes in this Prisons Act. In criminal law, there are 4 justice systems: retributive, deterrent, preventive, reformative. Retributive means eye for an eye. One person kills, he should also be killed. Deterrent means why you are putting a person accused behind the bars or convicts in the jails, because so that others also will not commit same kind of offense, right? That is deterrent. Now, what is preventive? Why are you putting a convict before the? Why are you putting a convict in the jail? Is because so that he will not commit a crime, anything in future. But the problem is, in majority of our jails in our country, these prisoners or the convicts who are in the jails, they are also operating from the jails as well. They will be there in 5 years in the jail, no use. After the 5 years, again they'll continue like criminal. There is no deterrent effect, there is no preventive effect. They will come out and they'll still commit the crimes. So what is the best option that we have? Reforming the individuals is very, very important. Reformative justice is what India is trying to follow right now. If you reform an individual, even when he or she is released out of the jail, he will be a good human being or a good or a law-abiding citizen. That's the reason why they wanted to stress, the center wanted to stress on the reformative justice. Even Supreme Court also stressed many times on the reformative justice. But the problem is prisons acts are falling under the state jurisdiction. Center cannot make a law because it falls under the state list. That's the reason why the center has passed a model act so that recently, so that the states will follow this model act and make jails as a reformative institutions. That's a current affair. The static is, what are the types of justice systems? In the book, I have mentioned what are the types of justice systems. Then if you understand what is the current affairs, you can actually correlate that. That's the reason they asked you. Not because it is mentioned in any book. Of course, Prisons Act, you're not a law student, or you're not in, say, for example, once you become an IPS officer, that time you will be studying the Prisons Acts and all. Now it is not required. Right? Any more doubts? Thank you. I hope no one has doubts here. So actually, I'm providing my, yeah, sure, Uday Kiran, please tell me. Maybe with respect to legal, we can have a session, or I can produce a document. So that would be useful for you guys. Only with respect to constitution and legal, not all the current affairs. Something which overlaps with the polity, yeah, I can try doing that too. Right? So anyone who is buying this book with that, if they correlate with the current affairs, they'll be able to answer the question. That part I can help. So it will be useful not only for GS students, it will be useful for optional students too. So one more thing I would like to welcome. One more thing I would like to tell here is, go through the book. If you have any doubts, you can actually mail me to my mail address. I will respond whenever I'll try to respond within 2 to 3 days because I'll be receiving a lot of mails too. So any doubts with respect to that, I will. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, one and all. I hope this session is useful for you. Let's be in touch. Let's have a, if you have any doubts with respect to Indian polity, constitution also, I'll try to address that too. Thank you. Have a nice day.